I know this isn't exactly a Shredder cosplay. I do want to cosplay him eventually, but that requires me learning how to make armor out of EVA foam, which is a skill I am still developing, so that's gonna be a while before we see that. Hey there, I'm Torisaur, and today we are ranking the Ninja Turtles' #1 op throughout this franchise, Orokusaki, aka the Shredder. It's fascinating how this character has become the iconic antagonist in this franchise when he's literally killed off in the first issue of the comic. But because of this, it's opened the way for some really interesting and varied interpretations, which we will be talking about today. As always, this ranking is limited to on-screen adaptations, but feel free to share your thoughts on any of his comic versions in the comments. With that, let's get into the ranking. In last place is the Shredder from the 2010s live-action films. I think Baber's Shredder is the worst for two primary reasons: the last-minute rewrites from the first movie and the absolute flop he is in the second movie. Starting with the former, Orokusaki originally did not exist in this universe. No, the Shredder was going to be the one and only Eric Sachs, a blatantly whitewashed version of Orokusaki. Just listen to those two names next to each other. Orokusaki? Eric Sachs. Crazy work. When there was justified outrage at this, the scenes with Orokusaki were shot later and added into the finished film. Because of this, his incorporation into the story feels choppy and a bit like an afterthought, since it quite literally was. The narrative definitely would have flowed better if they kept Eric Sachs as the Shredder, but that would have been an abhorrent choice, so I'm glad they at least tried to remedy that mistake. However, it unfortunately means that the Shredder doesn't fit into the narrative as nicely, and thus makes him a weaker character. Outside of that major issue, I do find the Shredder to be pretty fucking sick in the first movie. I know a lot of people don't like how he's been turned into this super extra Transformer looking menace that launches blades from his fingers, but personally, I think that shit is so cool and fun, and perfectly fitting for the style of this universe. Unlike most other versions of TMNT, the 2010s films are bombastic action movies. If you dropped this style of Shredder into any other universe, he would feel out of place, but alternatively, if you dropped most other Shredders into this universe, he would feel really underwhelming. The only one that could maybe match the energy is 2003's Utrom Shredder, because that bitch is extra as hell. I think Baber's Shredder is genuinely fun when you're able to ignore the issue of his blatant attempted whitewashing, but unfortunately the whitewashing isn't the only issue that pushes him to the bottom of this list, because Out of the Shadows made him look so damn pathetic. I think Out of the Shadows is a very fun movie, but one of my biggest issues with it is just how many antagonists they injected into the film. Introducing Baxter Stockman, Bebop, Rocksteady, and Krang while still trying to make us care about Shredder and Karai just did not work. In Shredder's case, he only serves as a pawn in Krang's plan, and is so immediately and embarrassingly defeated by Krang when he only just realizes that he was being used.
You betrayed me. Actually, I barely even thought about you.
On top of that, he goes from looking like this to this. This second design is by far the most boring Shredder design I have seen. Shredder needs to radiate aura, and you can have a simple Shredder design that achieves this, but I fear this is not it. Overall, Baber's Shredder is just wasted potential paired with bad decision making in the inception of the character, so to me, he is definitely the worst version. In 8th place is the Shredder from Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation. In the past, I've said Next Mutation Shredder is the weakest version, but ended up changing my mind due to the glaring issues with Baber's Shredder that I just talked about. I don't find Next Mutation Shredder to be enjoyable in the slightest. He's only in 2 episodes since he isn't the main antagonist of the series, and is explained as an enemy from the Turtles' past that is still lurking around and causing trouble. Apparently, the Shredder is an evil corruption that has taken over Orokusaki's soul, and Venus zaps him with her laser eyes in order to free Orokusaki from that corruption. But in the episode Enemy of My Enemy, we learned that it didn't work and he's apparently still evil, but now he's so much more pathetic as he doesn't have the support of his foot soldiers anymore.
Maybe Shredder is reformable after all.
And future versions of TMNT do approach the Shredder in a similar way where he is corrupted by evil, but they do it in a much better way than how it's handled here. On top of this, the acting is really painful to watch.
Foolish mutants! With the shuriken, I could destroy them all!
This ties into the same issue with Shredder from Out of the Shadows, where Next Mutation Shredder doesn't have the aura that the Shredder should have. So I would say he would definitely be the worst Shredder if it weren't for the additional issues I had with 2010's live action Shredder, because he is not at all enjoyable in the Next Mutation. At number 7 is the Shredder from the 1990 live action films. Like with my Splinter ranking, I'm sure people will be mad at me for putting 90s Shredder this low. However, unlike 1990 Splinter, who I think is a fantastic and delightful version and I could very easily accept as a favorite from this franchise, I I think 1990 Shredder genuinely sucks. Back to Shredder needing to have aura, 1990 Shredder acts like he's intimidating and threatening, but doesn't actually read as such at all. It feels like he's putting on an act as opposed to actually capturing that energy. He's very similar to Next Mutation Shredder in that way, not as bad, but really not that much better. Utrom Shredder's energy is exactly what 1990 Shredder is trying to emulate, but failing miserably. And the best example of why I really do not like 1990 Shredder is the final confrontation. First of all, the turtles literally do not know he exists until they meet him in this final confrontation. So despite him being the one holding Splinter captive, the turtles facing their father's captor just loses so much weight when they have no idea who he is. When he gives the iconic speech that so many people quote as him being super cool and intimidating, he literally just stands there, very awkwardly.
You've caused me enough trouble. Now you face the Shredder.
And the final fight is genuinely so anticlimactic. It's another attempt to make him look super intimidating and powerful by having him easily defeat the turtles. But the way the turtles attack him one at a time is just embarrassing and feels more like a reflection on them being bad at fighting as opposed to the Shredder being good at it. Not to mention Splinter defeats him by just flipping him off the roof, which is so lame. I could see a kid watching this movie and thinking that the Shredder is scary and intimidating like intended, which is why I give older fans who grew up with this movie grace when it comes to their love for this version of Shredder. But if you're like me and first watched the movie as a grown adult, I genuinely don't understand how you can see this man as one of the best Shredders, because he's pretty pathetic. It's also really silly to me how he survives his death at the end of the first movie, but somehow dies after being crushed under a dock as Super Shredder in The Secret of the Ooze. In general, I think the Super Shredder is a really fun and cool concept, but the actual confrontation with him is really anticlimactic as well, which is why I'm really glad the 2012 series did the Super Shredder concept justice, because they take the idea from The Secret of the Ooze and make it much more effective. Overall, I think 1990 Shredder is underwhelming. I recognize this is one of my more unpopular opinions, but I do feel very strongly about it. I'm not giving her a full spot in this ranking because I already ranked her separately, but between number 7 and 6, I would put 2003 Karai as the Shredder. If you want some of my more in-depth thoughts on her as a character, feel free to check out my Karai ranking. But in general, the concept of Karai taking up the mantle of the Shredder after her father's banishment is really cool. However, its execution leaves a lot to be desired. She fucks up the turtle's lair, which is kind of badass, but after that she really doesn't do much to make her stand out as a version of the Shredder. Because the concept is neat and she does shine in the role for at least one episode, I think she's definitely an improvement from the other Shredders I've discussed thus far, but could be better. In 6th place, I have Tengu, or Demon Shredder, from season 5 of the 2003 animated series. This is the first Shredder on the list I actually like, and I use that very loosely because I think he's just okay. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the idea of Orokusaki being corrupted by some evil entity that makes him the Shredder is a neat concept, and the execution here is definitely much better than in the Next Mutation. Tengu Shredder does a great job of capturing a very similar aura to Utrom Shredder, but the unique approach of him using magic and turning into a big-ass dragon is pretty sick. My issues with this Shredder are extremely nitpicky, so they don't affect my opinion on him too much, but I really don't think we needed Orokusaki to be a real guy, and Sharel stealing his likeness as Saki and the Shredder kinda sucks. Like, if it was just that Saki was a real person and Sharel mimicked that, it would be one thing, but him copying the Shredder as an identity is really lame in my opinion. I also absolutely despise the Ninja Tribunal. They're so pretentious and their entire vibe pisses me off more than is probably rational. Other than Hisomi, he's chill. Saki, and thus the Shredder coming from this group of pretentious individuals, makes me like him a little bit less. However, like I said before, these are very small nitpicky issues that really don't matter that much, and I think Tengu Shredder is still pretty cool, but definitely not the coolest Shredder to come from this universe. At number 5 is the Shredder from Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I would describe Batman vs. Shredder as being like 1990 Shredder if he was actually good. He's definitely one of the best Shredders that's just a guy as opposed to having some crazy demon powers or suit or being a secret alien. One of the coolest fights from this movie is the one between the Shredder and Batman towards the start of the film, and it does such a fantastic job of feeling like two highly trained warriors just using their martial arts prowess to go toe to toe. It's such a satisfying watch. His personality also feels a lot tamer, which in certain versions I don't think would work as well, but fits the tone of this movie beautifully. Again, he feels very much what I think people think 1990 Shredder is, but Batman vs. Shredder doesn't feel like he's performing that villain role and is genuinely threatening and conniving in a subtle way. Because this movie has so many characters, the Shredder doesn't really get the opportunity to shine in a way that makes him hold up to some of the other interpretations, but he is an incredibly solid version of the Shredder and serves his role in this movie pretty perfectly. In 4th place is the Shredder Shredder from Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Although we unfortunately didn't get much of this version of Shredder, partially due to season 2 of the series being cut in half, Rise Shredder beautifully executes the Demon Shredder concept. It's so much fun how he starts off as this animalistic beast that wreaks pure havoc and destruction wherever he goes, and then transforms into a fully conscious but just as destructive being for the series finale. One of Rise of the TMNT's absolute greatest strengths is its animation and especially its fight choreography, and anytime the Shredder is involved, we get a fantastic representation of that. I bring up the final fight with the Shredder in this series constantly, as it is one of my all-time favorite battles in this franchise. Rise Shredder just exudes badass exactly how the Shredder should. My first big issue with this Shredder is generally how little he's in the series, which again is probably due to season 2 being cut in half and the series being cancelled. And I do really love the corrupted soul concept as a unique approach to the Shredder, but I think I'm always just gonna prefer when he's a corrupt person as opposed to there being some supernatural force involved, especially in a franchise that is chock full of supernatural, sci-fi, and mystic elements. I love when one of the biggest antagonists is just a morally questionable dude. That said, given this direction specifically chosen for the Shredder in this universe, I think they did a fantastic job. Saki's soul being successfully freed from the corruption of the Shredder and reuniting with Karai is so beautiful. I also think it's really neat that the dark armor is something that came from the Krang, which we unfortunately don't see explored more beyond general implications because, again, the series was cancelled, but it's still a cool insight into the universe and a fun nod to Utrom Shredder. Speaking of and moving into my top 3, in third place I have Utrom Shredder from the 2003 animated series. I think generally this version of the Shredder is the fan favorite. I personally prefer a couple other versions over him, which I will explain when I get to them, but if you're looking for the Shredder with the most aura, it goes to Utrom Shredder, no question. His design is probably the most iconic and badass. You take one look at this walking suit of armor and you know you're in for a bad time. 2003 Shredder is another example of what people think 1990 Shredder is, but in a different way than Batman vs. Shredder. Since 2003 Shredder is still extremely extra and campy, however, it just works so much better in the context of this series in my opinion. And I think that's helped by the fact that the series is animated and 2003 Shredder doesn't fall into the same just a guy category that 1990 Shredder does. Utrom Shredder is an Utrom, which I think is such a fun and unique approach to the character. Speaking generally, I prefer when the Shredder is just a human guy, but I adore this angle and it helps tie the cartoonishly evil personality together a bit better. As much as I love and tend to prefer a more nuanced character with interesting emotional motives, it's also so much fun to have a character that is just purely evil. No Shredder has a body count like Utrom Shredder, that shit is in the millions. And this man was such an extreme hater of the Turtles that he was ready to destroy the entire multiverse just to be rid of them. Not even 2012 Shredder has reached that level of petty. There are a few very small things I don't love about Utrom Shredder, the biggest one being how many fake-out deaths he has towards the start of the series. But I loved when those deaths were used to contextualize the mystery of him secretly being an Utrom, Leo cutting off his head being the perfect example. Overall, 2003 Shredder is cool as hell and absolutely one of the best Shredders in the franchise. Even though he isn't my personal favorite, I can very easily see why he is the favorite for many. Another honorable mention that I'm gonna throw in here that I considered ranking separately from Utrom Shredder but decided to combine with him is Cyber Shredder from season 7, Back to the Sewer. If you're unfamiliar, Cyber Shredder is the backup digital consciousness of Utrom Shredder that is set loose in cyberspace when it takes over Viral's body, and this Cyber Shredder is eventually able to escape into the real world. It's a very convoluted way for them to reintroduce this version of the Shredder while he's still banished, but I think he's kind of fun. And having him crash Casey and April's wedding was kind of iconic. Given how short Back to the Sewer is and that Cyber Shredder is just Utrom Shredder in a different form, I don't have a lot of thoughts on him, nor do I think he really qualifies as a separate character for the sake of this ranking. However, I did want to at least acknowledge him as somewhat separate from Utrom Shredder because they do coexist. In second place, I have the Shredder from the 2012 animated series. As far as the serious, genuinely threatening Shredders go, 2012 Shredder is easily my favorite. Like I mentioned in Splinter's ranking, I think the Hamato Yoshi Oroku Saki backstory is the best it's ever been, as it does a fantastic job capturing the emotional stakes that created this feud, where Saki did genuinely love Shen and actually used to be in a relationship with her. I love how Shen is very conflicted about her feelings as well before finally choosing Yoshi. It makes that whole trio's dynamic very interesting and the emotional stakes so much stronger when she's accidentally killed in Saki and Yoshi's fight. I have some mixed feelings on Orokusaki's origin story specifically, with Saki turning against Yoshi because even though they were raised as brothers, it turns out that Saki's father led the Foot Clan and was killed by the Hamato clan, and when Saki learns this, he gets pissed and decides that he hates everyone in the Hamato clan and he and Yoshi aren't brothers because
We were never blood.
I do think that origin is generally pretty cool, and him being emotionally vulnerable with the Shen situation leading him to fully embrace the Foot Clan despite being raised by the Hamato is pretty solid writing. I think I just get hung up on the "we were never bloodline" because I think that's the justification they're trying to use to convince us that Leo Rai is technically okay. However, that's less of a Shredder problem and more of a Leo Rai problem. I hate to use Leo Rai of all things as a segue, but like I said in both Karai and Splinter's rankings, I adore the stolen daughter plotline. Karai serves as such a fantastic representation of Orokusaki's twisted psyche, and how much revenge on Yoshi has become all that matters to him. At first, Saki takes Karai in and raises her, seeing her as his own daughter, but it's pretty clear, especially as the series progresses, that his supposed love for his daughter is just another form of petty revenge against Yoshi. He's possessive of her but doesn't genuinely care for her well-being, locking her up when she betrays him, using her as bait which results in her mutation, and of course mind controlling her to use her as a pawn in his revenge plot. And beyond Karai, all of this culminates into his mutation into the Super Shredder, where he has become a mutant, one of the things he hates, and his corrupted mind and body carry him into the finale where he finally gets his revenge on Hamato Yoshi. 2012 Shredder is just a fantastic approach to Orokusaki being a corrupted man, not by some supernatural force, but his own vengeance mutating into pure madness, turning him into a monster long before he transforms into the Super Shredder. And the combination of 2012 Shredder being very human, but also a very corrupt and genuine threat makes him the best written Shredder in this franchise. Unfortunately for 2012 Shredder, though I do think he is more objectively the best Shredder, my favorite version of the Shredder is also my favorite character in the entire Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise, and that is the Shredder from the 1987 animated series. If you put 1987 Shredder in a 1v1 against basically any other Shredder in this franchise, he is absolutely losing that fight. However, what he lacks in genuine intimidation and threatening aura, he makes up for in personality tenfold. I don't think there are many characters in this franchise that match 1987 Shredder's sass, wit, and banter, culminating in a way that makes him genuinely so hilarious. Honestly, I think only 87 Raphael rivals him, but Shredder being an antagonist allows him to be extra mean in a way that is so much fun. He has such fantastic banter with all of the characters he interacts with, but my favorite thing about 1987 Shredder is his dynamic with Bebop, Rocksteady, and Krang. The way these four form a comedically dysfunctional family is an absolute delight, with so many great moments of Bebop and Rocksteady being treated like Shredder and Krang's rambunctious kids.
Wait until Krang hears what you've done. Krang, get up here. You two have got a lot of explaining to do.
And of course, Shredder and Krang constantly bickering like a married couple is not only iconic, but exactly the dynamic they were going for.
And it depends on relationships, and the relationship that I had with Krang, like he said, it was like we treated it like an old married couple, you know, because we were in this together.
Rest in peace, James Avery. You will never know how much I adored what you brought to this character and his relationship with Krang. Do I ship Shredder and Krang completely unironically? Yes. Are they my favorite ship in the series and also the entire franchise and also across every piece of media I've ever consumed ever? Also yes.
And just how are you paying for all this?
I borrowed your Alien Express card. I never leave the Technodrome without it.
This device is far from perfect.
Well, so are you. Stop smiling like that, Krang. I hate it when you smile like that.
Where are you?
In the Venice Opera House sub-basement. What does it look like? My apartment?
Actually, this looks nicer. Shredder, I need you.
That's what I keep trying to tell you, Krang.
It's a beauty, isn't it? Here, try it on for size.
A weapon that also makes a fashion statement. I like it.
I'm glad you approve.
Well, when I get back, I'm gonna zap you all with the giggle ray Krang invented.
And rest assured, it will be us who get the last laugh.
You see, Saki, you can find good help these days.
I think part of why this ship is so appealing to me is because of how weird it is. Like, that's an alien brain blob and a human man, which is inherently unhinged as fuck. But part of why I love interspecies ships like this, obviously with the caveat that both parties can equally communicate and consent as if they were both human, Mutation is it's such a great exercise in the idea of love is love. Queer romance is something that continues to be more positively represented in the modern day, but there is still so much hate and bigotry that it is a constant uphill battle. And so having the ship that is both literally queer and spiritually queer by being so unconventional, especially because this series is older and from a time when positive queer representation was so minimal, it just holds such an incredibly special place in my heart as a queer individual who has an unconventional perspective on romantic relationships. Shipping tangent aside, there are so many other small moments that give us insight into Shredder just being a guy that are so normal sounding that it's kind of hilarious, but also a bit endearing.
Ooh, you have a way with words, Shredder.
Well, actually, I always wanted to be a writer. Being a ruthless conqueror was my second choice.
I didn't know baking was one of your things.
A ninja warrior is trained in many skills, Krang. Oh, I wish I had paid more attention to my piano teacher.
I just love that this man set on conquering the world just casually offhand has some other hobbies like writing, baking, and playing piano. It's not something that would really work for any other version of the Shredder when they're meant to be super serious and intimidating. And it makes 1987 Shredder unique in a way that is very charming. While 1987 Shredder absolutely does not stack up against the other Shredders in terms of intimidation, he's so perfectly cartoonishly threatening within the context of the 1987 universe. This series has such a different feel to its world and its characters, as it follows that super cheesy Saturday morning cartoon logic, where even the most ridiculous plan to take over the world poses a genuine threat. And that ridiculousness is not only a lot of fun, but the perfect representation of the way 1987 Shredder is actually just as intimidating and threatening as other Shredders, as long as you examine him within the context of his universe. Obviously, if you drop 1987 Shredder anywhere else, he's gonna look like a complete joke, but in a universe where silly can be serious, 1987 Shredder fits right in and it's absolutely delightful. Looking at 1987 Shredder as a whole, he's generally a lighthearted character with a lot of fun and silly moments, but can very easily switch to that cartoonish evil that makes this era of animated shows so iconic, and that's a characterization that no other version of TMNT can get away with. Because of this, 1987 Shredder will always be my favorite Shredder and favorite character across the entire Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise. My undying love for 1987 Shredder, combined with my desire to tell a more nuanced Shredder story in my version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TMNT Genesis, made developing Genesis Shredder a really big but extremely fun challenge. Because how do you combine a serious, emotional, and threatening character with an unserious, cartoony, and whimsical one? But I'm actually really happy with the way I ended up mixing together these very different interpretations of the Shredder into a compelling character, and I really hope y'all like the approach I took to him. But unfortunately, I'm gonna have to save talking about Genesis Shredder for a different video that will honestly probably go out tomorrow. I was originally gonna keep his story in at the end of this video like I've done for the other rankings, but after typing up all of my bullet points for him, I realized that it is very likely I would be talking about him for about half of the video, potentially even more. And look, I'm excited to yap about Genesis Shredder because I am very proud of him, but I couldn't justify the bonus segment of the video being that long. So if you're interested in hearing about my version of the Shredder, that video will be out soon. Which version of the Shredder is your favorite? Do you prefer the super serious and emotional backstory of Shredders like 2012 Shredder, or do you share my love for the whimsy of 1987 Shredder? Speaking of, boom, Lego 1987 Shredder. Wouldn't it be cool if he was real? Well, he could be, alongside Krang, Bebop, Rocksteady, Baxter Stockman, April and the Turtles, and the Technodrome and Turtle Van, if the LEGO Ideas Technodrome my friend and I made gets enough support. Supporting the project is completely free and the link is in the description. The next TMNT character ranking will be either Raphael or Michelangelo. I'll eventually be putting up a poll to decide which of them I'll be ranking first, so make sure to subscribe to catch that poll and the video when it comes out. Fair warning that you might be seeing a higher concentration of Miraculous Ladybug videos over the next couple months, as I'm doing reviews of all of its Season 6 episodes and I have some catching up to do, especially with Season 6 wrapping soon. But after that, there will definitely be a lot more Turtles content for y'all, and I'll be starting my LEGO Ninjago season by season review if that sounds interesting to you as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and hype if you did. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.